So welcome to the multi-series training. This is what we call educational sales, new patient educational sales. It's the most effective form of marketing, and it's essentially a way to get the vast majority of patients who are not looking for chiropractors. And this is exactly how I opened 77 offices in 20 states. There are a few major components, but this was definitely one. If I would have waited around for the 8% of the population looking for marketing, I never would have. I'd still be working full time. I would have never retired at age 33. So again, I'm Dr. Paul. I've opened 77 offices in 20 states, past speaker, 3 chiropractic colleges. I've authored about 10 books now, and we teach and train marketing, patient education, consulting. Basically, there's 3 things that we do really well. I teach what I did, and so what that is we teach how to have a highly profitable practice, number 1, with all the components. Number 2, how to leverage that into passive income with associate doctors, and then that creates freedom and passive income. And then number 3 is how to invest in the wealth strategies. That's how I was able to retire at age 33. So we're going to cover one of the major components, which is new patient educational sales. So we're going to go big picture to small picture. And what this does, it creates more new patients than you physically can handle. Now, when you combine that with patient education, in other words, knowing how to keep patients, this gets to be really big. It gets to be a huge a positive. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're looking at here. So let's look at a basic graph first, and we're gonna kind of go big and get smaller and smaller, and then we're gonna go into great detail of how this applies in the office from day to day, week to week. Okay, and it changed my life when I learned it. And of course, I didn't learn it in chiropractic. This is based on what's called the S-curve of economics, is what it's based on. And so here we go. So when you look at the chiropractic profession, you go, okay, here's the curve. What percentage of the patients are looking for chiropractors? That's only 8%. So that's a small number. So if you don't know the marketing over here, you're stuck with 8%, and you're stuck with its geographic radius of draw, how far of a distance people will come to you. And that varies in chiropractic. We'll go into that, as well as what's called psychographic barriers. So you're limited. You won't attract people from 100 miles away with a brick and mortar business. And so that's the issue. Then you got your competition. So if there's no other chiropractors, the great news is you'll get that 8%, but that's typically not reality. So now it goes, okay, if you've got a 3-mile radius, go, how many more chiropractors? Well, if you only have 1 or 2, that's better. You'll naturally get more. Well, you got 5, 6, 7, or 10, 20 more, then you're going to have a lot less of that 8%. So that's called market forces. That's just where it's at. Now, there are things you can do to get more of your fair share of that 8%, and we'll cover that to some degree. But that's not where the big business is. The big business, in other words, the majority of patients. Remember, the majority of patients are over here. 92% of the population is not seeking chiropractic care. Okay, so let's start going into some rules and guidelines here with marketing, and some of these are hard for chiropractors to swallow. But these are the facts. So 92% of the population is not looking for chiropractors. Does that mean they do not have in other words, they do not have a perceived need for a chiropractor? Does that mean they don't have a chiropractic problem? No. Out of that 92%, 3 out of 4 of them do. 3 out of 4. Now first, let's define what a chiropractic problem is. These are called gateways. These are the reasons people come to chiropractors. Number 1, 84% of the reasons that patients will naturally come to chiropractors for back pain, neck pain, headaches. Neuromusculoskeletal, neck pain, back pain, headaches. Those are the gateways. 7% is for extremities. Shoulder, elbow, knee. So only 7% of 8% is and it's for all the extremities. It's not all knees. So if you were going to try to just do knees, it'd be a percentage of 7% of 8%. We're talking about a real small number. So that takes us to 91%. What is the other 9%? Well, the other 9% is for the visceral problems. Now, but here's what's important to know. So first of all, we're talking about a small number to begin with, 9% of 8%. And you go, that's the people that get treated for asthma, allergy, bedwetting, what chiropractors call the somatovisceral reflex or the subluxation. But here's what's important to know about it. No, not only is it a small number, it's 9% of 8%, okay? But it's actually smaller than that. Out of that 9% that does get treated for the somatovisceral reflex, 80% of it started, or the gateway was back pain and neck pain. That's what they came in for. Less than 20% of that 9% actually had asthma, allergy, bedwetting, colic, and thought, I'm going to call the chiropractor. Picked up the phone and called the chiropractor to make an appointment for asthma, allergy, bedwetting, the visceral somatic reflexes. So only 20% of 9% of 8% after 120 plus years. So there's some serious issues with that. Next is, one is it's a real small number. Number two, it violates, when you do, and we'll go into this, it's called a gateway. When you violate a gateway, it creates a paradigm shift. So one of the things in marketing we're going to pay a lot of attention to is what's called a paradigm shift. Because a paradigm shift increases defenses and resistance and decreases trust and confidence. So we're going to pay attention to those four factors. In marketing, you cannot violate those. And that's what happens when you violate gateways. That's an example, and we'll go into this as I go through when I actually talk about gateways. But here's the big picture. So what's the point that I'm trying to get across here? Out of this, it's a small number to begin with, number one. There's already a need, so you don't have to establish need. That's good. It's 8%, that's a small number. It's limited by your geographic radius of draw. That's not good. And it's limited by your competition. How many other chiropractors are in that same area? That's not good, okay? This is why most chiropractors don't do well. Now, when you combine low new patients and a significant dropout, because that's the next part of the equation why chiropractors don't do well, they lose patients fast. They lose them by the 6th, 8th, 10th visit. I do statistics all the time, and almost 100% of the time I do a statistic, most chiropractors are losing 1/3 to half of their patients by the 6th visit. Meaning just to stay at a certain number, they got to have 1/3 to 50% new patients just to stay even. So they routinely lose a lot of patients. And a lot of times they don't know it because they don't keep stats. They don't see it. And then that's another reason chiropractors always think they need new patients. So it's a combination. Number one is you're naturally going to get small numbers of people. And then when you lose them, that's why a lot of chiropractors are only seeing 40 visits a week, 60 visits a week. That's why right there. Okay. So the first goal, obviously, in marketing is know how to keep them. So if you're not going to get very many like this, you better be really good at keeping them. So that's number one. Okay. Now you go into the marketing side. Because this is where all the business is. It's over here. It's not over here. Now, we can do some marketing over here to get more of our fair share than the neighboring chiropractor. We can do that. But this is where it's abundant. 3 out of 4 of these people have neck pain, back pain, headaches. Now, how do we know this is such a big market? Well, back pain is the second leading cause of people going to your local GP. So if you were to look at a map and go, okay, well, how many GPs do I have in a 2-3 mile radius? The second leading reason that they're getting new patients is back pain. In other words, patients are driving by your office, the chiropractor's office, every day going to the GP for back pain. And 99% of back pain is mechanical, not organic, meaning it's chiropractic, it's not medical. But that's the way it is. That's the market. Okay, so it's the second leading cause of going to the your local medical doctor. It's the second leading cause of going to the emergency room. So your local hospitals, there's people driving in there every day with back pain. Right by your office. They're driving right by your office, going over to the emergency room. It's the second leading workers' compensation injury, back pain. It's the number one reason for the most selling drug. The most selling drug is NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. What's the reason people are taking it? Joint pain. Do chiropractors treat joint pain? Sure. Joint pain. And the number one disability in the United States, 1 in 5 people have, is osteoarthritis. Is arthritis, and the number one type of arthritis is osteoarthritis. Do chiropractors help prevent osteoarthritis, minimize the impact of arthritis, and help arthritis? Yeah. Yeah, that's what chiropractors are really good at. Okay. Is that where the public goes? No. No, they're taking NSAIDs. They're going to the local GP. They're going to the emergency room. They'll modify their behavior. They're doing everything else but going to a chiropractor. And I'm not going to get too much into that a little bit, but the number one reason is it's called violation of line extension. And the great example that I give all the time is, which is the number one rule in marketing, you can't be everything to everybody. That's when you're trying to be everything to everybody, in other words, subluxation, saying you can treat all this whole variety of stuff, cancer, asthma, allergy, immune system, energy, back pain. It confuses the heck out of the market. And when that happens, trust and confidence go down, defense and resistance goes up. And that's why the chiropractic profession has a 67% negative name recognition with only 8% utilization after 120 plus years. It has nothing to do with education. I hear this all the time. They go, we just need to educate better. Well, guess what the generation of chiropractors said before you said that? And guess what the generation of chiropractors before that said? No. You need to stop educating on you can do everything. That's what needs to happen. And a classic example I give is when you want tacos, are you going to go to Taco Bell or Kentucky Fried Chicken? When you want pizza, are you going to go to Pizza Hut or are you going to go to Kentucky Fried Chicken? And then another example that I give is I go, what if I started saying I'm going to sell, this is a different category, just like asthma, allergy, and bedwetting is a very different category than back pain, neuromusculoskeletal back pain. And most chiropractors don't realize that. It's a different category. So, an example I say is, what if I said Taco Bell's now starting to sell computers? What just happened to your defenses, resistance, trust, and confidence in Taco Bell? Well, it goes down. That's what natural. These are natural ways of thinking. So one of the very first things you can't do is you can't violate gateways. That's the number one problem in chiropractic. That's why there's such low utilization and such high negative name recognition. Because what just happened to your trust in Taco Bell when I said they're selling computers? Do you even want to buy a taco from Taco Bell now? No, you don't. What if I said KFC was selling cars? You're going to go buy. Do they have the ability to sell cars? Yeah, they have the money. Does Taco Bell have the money to build and sell computers? Sure, yeah. But smart companies know this. And so they segment, they divide it out, and they try to be one thing to a market, not everything. And so that's why the parent company, Yum, doesn't put a restaurant on the corner and say, we're Yum, we sell tacos, KFC, and chicken, and pizza. That's why they don't do it, because they're smart. It's a Fortune 500 company. And the number one reason companies get kicked out of the Fortune 500, because the revenues are going down, is violation of line extension. So there's ways of doing it. Matter of fact, another common example is the Rogaine, the hair growth. Well, that was initially, man, there's a big one right now with the diet drug that's used for diabetes. Well, an example is like they found out when the Rogaine was a totally different name and it was used for heart murmurs. That's what the medication was for. Well, they found out that the byproduct of using it was hair growth. So what did the company do? See, they didn't say, well, this is the heart medicine that'll grow your hair. That's a total violation of the natural perception of how we perceive things. That's a gateway shift. Trust and confidence goes down, defenses and resistance goes up. So what they did is they rebranded it. They took it, they moved it out in a total separate category, and they called it Rogaine. You don't even know Rogaine is a heart medication because they don't market it that way. They brand it and market it. Rogaine now is for hair, and it's a different name, and it's branded for heart. They don't mix the two. They're separately branded, and they're individually branded. See, that's how it works. So that's what's going on here. We'll get into a lot more. But so how big is this market? Well, that's 75%. 3 out of 4 is 75%. That's a big market. This is where all the new patients are, not over here. Okay. Having said that, you go, how do you get them? And a good analogy I like to use is this is a small pond with just a few fish. This is a huge pond. Tons of fish. 99% of the chiropractors are fishing in this little pond for just a few fish. Very few people are over here fishing where there's tons of fish to be caught. And when I learned this, it's called the S curve of economics. This is what's taught. It's how products and services are consumed by consumers. It's science. It's not a philosophy. This is exactly how it happens. It's science. So when I learned this, what's the first thing I do? I go, wow, that's a big market. Then I go, okay, how do we access this? Well, advertising will get this, and we'll cover that. But this is totally different. And that's what we're going to go into next. Is go, how do you get this versus how do you get this? And it's two totally different types of marketing. Two totally different types of marketing. This is how I opened 77 offices in 20 states with a gross revenue of about $80 to $100 million a year. That is what made the difference. Now, this combined with patient education, in other words, knowing how to keep them. Because remember, the more that you know how to keep patients, the less new patients you need. And the average doctor that has good patient retention, and I'm going to call good patient retention, is a patient that stays through the 3 phases of healing, the inflammation phase, the repair phase, and the model phase. I'm not even going to call a good patient what chiropractors call maintenance care. And you don't even want to fool with maintenance care because it's only 3%. So there's a way to get people to stay past their problem, but it's not called maintenance care. And you don't want to fool with maintenance care because it's 3%. So you have a 97% chance of losing when you try to sell maintenance care. That is also educational sales, and we'll cover that. Okay, so this is what we're dealing with. So the goal, obviously the first goal, is know how to keep patients first. That's number one. At least be able to keep them through the 3 phases of healing, if not through it's not called maintenance care, it's called lifestyle care. And it's not through advertising, it's through educational sales. Okay, so this is the opportunity. You don't know how to keep patients, and you're only getting 8%. That's where you're stuck at 20 visits, 40 visits, 60 visits, something like that. That's when it's real bad. And this is the majority of chiropractors. This is why they're always looking for new patients. And some of the most common excuses I see right there when a doctor's stuck down there is they say, well, my area is not good, or the insurance isn't good in my area, or, my community's not health-minded. They always blame it on everything else but themselves. I never hear a doctor say, you know what, I'm kind of ignorant on marketing. I really don't know what I'm doing. And I'm stuck with market forces. I never hear that. But that's what's going on. Okay, so let's go to the next category. What's the difference in marketing that's going to get this person or this person? Well, here's how it works. Here's the core formula of marketing. We're just going to go, okay, let's say we're going to go into target market. We'll get to that in just a second, but I want to go to the core formula to describe the differences in marketing. So there's publicity, there's advertising, and there's educational sales. That's pretty important to know that. And to know which one to use and why to use it. That's what's going to determine if you can get these people or not. Okay. This is based on this formula. Need is equal to money times time divided by trust. Divided by trust. That's the formula right there. This is the core formula that gets these people right here. Now, it's not the formula for this because these people already have a need. Now, what I have to do is deal with the other factors. Money, time, trust. I have to deal with those factors to get those patients. Not these. These, this is the biggest category there is right there. Establishing need. That's the single most important thing to know in marketing. How do you establish need? What does that mean? That's this absolute core of marketing. If you're going to learn one thing, learn that. Okay, so how does it line up? Well, publicity only affects trust. Okay, so will it get these people? No. And it's only affecting one of the four major formulas. That's why it works the least. So there's reasons to do publicity, to increase name awareness, increase trust, but it only attracts what's called the low-hanging fruit. In other words, the real high-need people, which is a very, very small percent. So that's why it works the least. But it is used in marketing to some degrees as the precursor. So a lot of times we'll do publicity, advertising, educational sales. We'll kind of do a combination of all three. But this is how it applies. Publicity does not establish need. It does not affect money. It does not affect time. It only affects trust. Advertising, if it's done right, will affect money, time, and trust. That's why advertising works better than publicity. But again, it's not affecting need. So if it's not affecting need, can you use advertising to get any of these people over here that do not have a perceived need for a chiropractor? No. Now it'll work better over here because there's already a perceived need. It'll work better than publicity. Okay? And obviously there's way deeper components to this. There's much to, major components relative to advertising that increase the effectiveness of advertising. So we'll go into that. Okay. Educational sales affects all of them. It establishes need, minimizes the obstacle of money, minimizes the obstacle of time, and it affects trust, increases trust. That's why educational sales works so well and is the only form of marketing that works into the largest segment of the market, the 92%. By the way, on a percentage basis, 3 out of 4, this actually represents 68% of the market versus 8%. That's how massive this is versus this. And this is why routinely, we can do educational sales to 10 people that have no motivation or desire to go to a chiropractor, and we'll get all 10 of them to come in, or at least 70% of them to come in for care. That's why. And again, the vast majority of people out there have a chiropractic problem to some degree, They're just taking NSAIDs, they're modifying their behavior, they're going to the GP, emergency room, they're doing everything else but going to the chiropractor. And it has nothing to do with education. It has everything to do with education. The wrong education is called a paradigm shift, because I'm not going to buy a computer from Taco Bell, and they're not going to buy cancer treatment from a chiropractor. They're not going to buy immune treatment from a chiropractor, because the gateway is the chiropractic, whether you like it or not. The market forces has shown what the gateways are. It's back pain, neck pain, and headaches. It's neuromusculoskeletal. Back pain, neck pain, headaches, 84%, and it still stays in the neuromusculoskeletal categories of extremity. That's 91%. And even of the 9%, 80% of that was from the patients who came in from the gateway. And then the chiropractor did his, subluxation spiel, and their kid went under care for asthma, allergy, or bedwetting. Less than 20% of 9% of 8% actually think to call a chiropractor for asthma, allergy, or bedwetting. After 120 plus years of education. What's the wrong education? That's why. It's a total violation of line extension. It's the number one rule in marketing. Be something to somebody instead of trying to be everything to everybody. When you try to be everything to everybody, you essentially become nothing to everybody. That's chiropractic. That's where it plays out. So I always say there's good news and bad news about this. The bad news, it's bad for the profession. Not a lot of people seek chiropractic care. It's bad for chiropractors who don't know the educational sales of marketing of what I'm getting ready to cover. It's great if you're a chiropractor and you know educational sales. When I learned this is when I was able to get way more patients than I physically can handle, and I was able to retire at age 33. If I did not know this, and I was stuck fighting with all the other chiropractors in my area, I would still have to be practicing. I practiced in a small town, a bedroom community of 3,000. There were 2 other chiropractors. Those chiropractors saw 60 to 80 visits a week. I saw 350 a week, had 2 full-time associates. I had more business than I knew what to do with. And then I trained in it and I taught it. We brought doctors in, trained them in it, opened them, and they took off because that's what they learned. They learned this, not that. That's the difference it makes. It's total abundance or starving, or always fighting for new patients. It's huge, the difference. Just like patient education. When you know patient education and say you got a 25, 30, 35 patient retention versus 8, 10, or 12, you're talking about 2, 3, or 4 times the income, one versus the other. It's huge. The difference in patient education can be huge. The difference in marketing can be huge. And when you combine them both, you know how to keep them and you know how to get them, the average chiropractor can only process 20 new patients a month. If you're good and you know how to keep patients through the 3 phases of healing, you won't have any more time because all your patients are staying for care, and you have limited time called industrial hours that they're going to come in. Most of it's in the late afternoon after work, early morning, or early afternoon. And again, that depends on one of 3 categories, whether you're inner city, suburb, or rural. Those will change depending on which one you're in. Okay. This is core right here. This is absolutely core. Understanding this, and gateway. That's core to understanding the basics of marketing. It all starts right here. So when I see a person, this is what I say. I go, wait a minute. Whether I look at a group, I see a person out shopping, or I see everybody shopping, I go, okay. In the next year, 8% of those people are going to be looking for a chiropractor within a confined area, divided by the competition. Then I look, I go, 92% of them. Out of the 92%, the 25% does not have a chiropractic problem. I'm going to leave them alone. I don't care if they has asthma, allergy, or bedwetting, because that's a violation of gateways, just like it's going to be hard as hell for Taco Bell to sell you a computer or KFC to sell you a car. I don't even have to because the market's too big. So out of this, I got 3 out of 4 that have back pain, neck pain, old injuries, arthritis. Just those alone, just from the market itself. They're just not looking for a chiropractor. So this is where the big market's at. I go, well, how do I reach them? Well, I can't use publicity. Doesn't establish need. I can't use advertising. It doesn't establish need for this big market. But works really, really well is educational sales. Now this word, educational sales, it gets to be a really important word. So, a lot of times when I say that word, chiropractors think, oh, just educate them. No, that's not what it is at all. I'm going to go into exactly what educational sales is. And it is not just educating. You just educate them, you're getting nothing. They're not coming in. And I'm going to go into it in great detail. So we're going to keep this in mind right here. This is what we're going to be paying attention to in a large degree. This is the big picture. This is where it all starts. This is where the majority of business is. This is where the minority of business is. This is how it got this way. It's called the S-curve of economics. When you learn it, you create a tremendous amount of business. In other words, like me, I was able to, I taught this to a chiropractor recently. He did a presentation to, there were 10 people in the audience. None of them were looking for a chiropractor. He signed up 14. He signed up all 10 of them and 4 of their spouses. Advertising wouldn't have done that. Education would not have done that. Publicity would not have done that. He did it because he knew educational sales. That doctor joined me when he was seeing 30 visits a week. In less than 3 months, he was seeing 150 patient visits. We taught him patient retention first because he was losing 8 out of 10 patients in the first 6 visits. So he didn't know how to keep them. He didn't know how to get them. So he was getting very few patients and losing them left and right. He was in trouble. He was on the verge of bankruptcy, going under. So first thing we did is taught him how to keep them, because it doesn't matter if we dump him in there and he's losing them in 3 or 4 visits anyway. So that's the first thing we did. Practice starts coming up. Then we went over to educational sales. See, because we can create this. We can't control advertising. But if you know educational sales, you can create them whenever you want, and as many as you want. So that's what we taught him immediately. He did 1 presentation with educational sales, 10 people, signed up 14. None of them were going to come in. Then he put them into his updated knowledge of patient education and kept them for 30, 35 visits. That's how he went from 30 visits a week to 150 visits a week in like 90 days. And in 6 months, he was seeing over 200 visits a week, and he had to hire an associate doctor. He went from 30 visits a week, struggling, going under, to 6 months later, seeing more patients he physically can see, and hired an associate doctor. That's the difference it makes when you understand and know this. That's what we're covering in detail. So we'll go further in this in the next section.